We are.
You should record as well, Peter.
What?
You should record as well.
I
Right
just
now.
pressed record, but I'm not sure if I pressed record to on this computer.
Now it's recording. Yes.
All right, fine. All right. Okay, good. So we are, let's see, I don't know what session we are. What session are we? We are, let's see, we started on Saturday, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're session number 6, and there's 7 sessions. Tomorrow will be the last one of this series. And this is on the book of Genesis called BERESHIT in Hebrew. And today we're going to be talking about Isaac, who is known in Hebrew as Yitzhak. And Isaac being the only son of Abraham and Sarah, and his significance and his role and so forth. And from multiple perspectives, including, actually, no, I'm wrong. We did Isaac yesterday.
You did that yesterday.
So
I was going to tell you, but I didn't want to stop you.
We're going to talk about Isaac and
Jacob.
His only child with Rebekah, whose name is Jacob. And later he gets the name Israel, which is the name of the country because the country is named after the 12 tribes of Israel. So they go back to this patriarch, this particular patriarch of Jacob, Israel, because the other children of Jacob, the other children of Isaac took other paths in life. It was this particular child, Jacob, who became the founding father of the 12 tribes who then inhabited what came to be known as Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. And the land of Israel was divided up into regions given to each of the sons, with the exception of Levi, who are dedicated to the priesthood, to serving in the temple. Levi does not have a portion because they are their full-time work is to serve the community as assistants to the Kohanim, to the priests, who are all descendants of Moses's brother. Okay. And so anyway, I'm gonna get you that document so you can look at this document. Just 1 minute. No, not that one. This one.
Screen
all right.
Share.
All right, and I'm going to screen share. And where we go.
Yep. There you go.
No, that's the wrong one. This is the right one. Okay. So I have Israel. This document is, no, this is what we're looking at today. Yes. Okay. So yesterday we talked about Isaac, but then at a certain point in the story, it becomes about Isaac and his son Jacob, and how this transfer of inherited spiritual authority is taking place. So first, I want to share with you in this document, I have various links that you will find very useful, full of fascinating details on the way that Jews understand Jacob or Israel, the way they understand him in his role, and the way Christians do and the way Muslims do. And there are very important statements in all three of those religions about Jacob. And then there are also some very unique statements that are found in the Baha'i writings, which we will get to later. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did with Isaac. I'm going to, because this is really a continuation of Isaac with Jacob, the takeaways from the text that we're actually, if you read those particular chapters. And as I said before, it's quite a bit of material. Under other circumstances, if I have the opportunity to do a longer course on the Bible, or even the Pentateuch, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, we'll take the time to be able to read every chapter so that we can study verse by verse rather than have to look at a number of chapters altogether each day and come to some understanding of what is said there. So this is very this is not an introductory level at all, but it's a summary perspective. It's not I would go into much more detail. We'd examine the particular verses much more carefully if we had more time. Like I said, probably we should do this. I think, considering that we live in a country which is the vast majority of people who are religious at all and who have a religious heritage are Christian, it's really kind of important for us to understand the Bible. And not all of us were brought up with the Bible. Not all of us went to church regularly, or went, probably more importantly, to some sort of Sunday school where we would get systematic education in the Bible. It is occasionally I run into individuals who have that background, but not very many of them are Baha'is. And it's important for us to have this kind of understanding, and this has been pointed out to us, for example, in The Secret of Divine Civilization, where Abdu'l-Baha says, how can you possibly teach somebody about your religion if you don't know their religion? You can't. Because you have to create a bridge from their point of view to a wider understanding. So in any case, we're going to do our best here. So the first takeaway we get from the story of Jacob is that, like his father Isaac, he had a miraculous birth. When I say miraculous, I mean his mother, like I'm sorry, his wife, Jacob's wife, and Isaac's wife, and also, as we'll see, as we read, Abraham's wife, Sarah, all three of them had problems having children. They were sterile, all right? They were, I don't know what the polite term is for that currently, but basically they couldn't have kids. And then it was through the intercession of God that they were able to have children. So in the case of Isaac prayed to God, asked for God to help so that his wife could conceive. And it was because of his prayer and the action of God that Rebekah was able to conceive this child, Jacob. And then she was obviously very surprised, and she was wondering why it is that there was so much action in the womb. And so she asked God, what's going on? And God said to her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. So she received a prophecy about her birth. And all of these are very important for us to understand, so that we get the context of the biblical story in the New Testament of John the Baptist and of Jesus. Those miraculous births of both of them are not in some sort of a vacuum. They exist in a continuity with the previous patriarchs of the Jewish people. So another theme that we take away from, besides the miraculous birth, is there's a very odd story in which has a direct similarity to an earlier story. Earlier, we saw that Abraham was visiting Abimelech, who was the king of the Philistines, in their capital city of Gerar. And when he was visiting there, he was afraid of what might happen. And so he said that Sarah was his sister. And this led to a whole series of circumstances. And eventually, Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, said to him, "This is not necessary. You don't need to pretend that she's your sister. There's no hostility in my heart. I don't wish you any harm." And so this peculiar story is told about Abraham, and then Isaac does exactly the same thing. You see, and I put there where these stories are found in the book of Genesis. In the 20th chapter is the story of Abraham with Abimelech, and Isaac, the story of him and Abimelech is told in the 26th chapter. Basically, the same story is reiterated. And the Baha'i writings, to my knowledge, do not give any specific enlightenment about the meaning of that story. But it may be that in the future, Baha'is will be able to discern principles that reveal to us the meaning of this strange passage. So I'm very reluctant to come to any conclusions about it, not only because I don't find any illumination from the writings, but also because I don't find any illumination anyplace else. It's just a peculiar story. Then the third takeaway is that God appears to Isaac and tells him not to go to Egypt, which is very interesting. Not to go to Egypt, because there was I suppose, a very strong temptation at that point for him to go to Egypt. I think the circumstances later were that the Jewish people ended up going to Egypt when Joseph was alive, when Joseph was the prime minister of the Pharaoh. And it was because of famine. It was because of a climate change that was basically making it impossible for them to stay in the promised land. But here was not the right time. He's told specifically by God, you stay and you go to what would now be called the Gaza Strip. That's where Gerar was, and told him to go there. And then Isaac makes a covenant with Abimelech, a covenant of peace and coexistence with Abimelech, which is something I hope and wish that our fellow human beings will pay attention to in that region of the world, because that's exactly what they need to do, is make a covenant of peace and cooperation. Then we have Isaac blessing Jacob on his deathbed instead of Esau. And this is a major theme that runs all through the story of Isaac and Jacob, is that Esau was born before Jacob. So normally the firstborn boy, is the one who receives the blessing as the inheritor and leader of the family and the passing of the father. However, in this case, there is a Jacob is born by divine intervention. And he and so because Esau, even though he was the firstborn, therefore he is chosen to be the one to carry on the prophetic lineage, the spiritual leadership of his father. And the way that it becomes possible for Jacob to actually take what would have been the rightful place of his brother Esau is that his mother, Rebekah, is always looking after him and making sure that this beloved son of hers is going to get the opportunity to be his father's inheritor. And so you have story after story in which she does that. She makes sure that her son Jacob is going to receive the birthright. And between Esau and Jacob, there develops this very strong antipathy. It's not coming from Jacob originally. Jacob doesn't have anything against his brother, but Esau feels that he's been cheated of his birthright, and he feels this anger because he is not being treated equally with his brother. This is a theme that you must recognize from we've encountered this over and over again. In the Bible, we have this story. The first place we encounter it is between Cain and Abel. The reason why Cain hates Abel is because his brother is getting more attention. He's getting more attention from God. He's getting more attention from Adam. And this angers him so much that he kills his brother. And this anger towards your brother because he's being favored ahead of you is a recurring theme. It's something that we encounter over and over. Also, a recurring theme is that Abraham sends Isaac back home, sends him back to Mesopotamia or and the place has different names. Padan Aram is one name. Haran is another name. Ur of the Chaldees was the original name. He sends him back home to his brother's family when it's time for his son to get married. He doesn't want him to marry anybody in town. And the reason why is because the inhabitants, the vast majority of the inhabitants of the Promised Land are Canaanites, and they're all polytheists, and they don't worship God, and they don't know God. There is no connection between them and God because they are preoccupied with their worship of idols. And so, just as Abraham had sent Isaac to go and get a wife in his original homeland, Isaac is going to send Jacob to do the same thing. And so one of the things I want to point out is that, and this is something that it really escaped me for a long time, is that the family of Abraham become believers in God. So yes, he went to the Holy Land. He went to the Promised Land in order to establish a community of monotheists, worshipers of God. But through his family connections, he was teaching monotheism to the people back home, and they became monotheists as well. And that's why he could send his family members back home in order to find a suitable partner who could then raise children who would believe in the one God. Then there's the famous story of Jacob's ladder. Jacob has a dream of angels ascending and descending, and God speaks to him, and then comes the command to call this place where he had this vision, where he had this dream, it was originally called Luz, and to call it Bethel. And Bethel is actually an English translation or modification of the Hebrew original, which is Beit El. Beit El means the house of God. So it was to be the holy place for the Abrahamic worshipers of God, until such time as Jerusalem was designated as the holy place from which all prayers were to be offered and the gathering place. But this Yerushalayim came much later. The first place was Beit El, was the house of God. And by the way, the tradition of the location of Beit El was passed down generation after generation, and so it is recognized as such, that location now in modern Israel. Then Jacob goes, he's sent by his father. As I said, he's sent back to Pandan Aram to go and stay with his family. And this is with his mother's family. Okay. So he's sent to stay with Rebecca's family. And that member of the family who's the leader is named Laban, and he goes there to get a wife. That's his purpose, is to find the person he's going to get married to. It becomes very complicated. It becomes complicated because Laban is a businessman, and he decides he's going to get the most he can out of this young guy who's obviously very capable. So he says, okay, you can marry one of my daughters. Okay. And then Jacob picks the younger daughter. And then Laban says, okay, you can do that. But first you have to marry the older daughter, because she's the older one and she needs to get married first. So in order to have the younger one, he agrees to have the older one. And then Laban says, okay, for the first one, you have to work for 7 years. But this is very interesting because at some point it says a week. So I'm not really sure whether it's 7 years or it's actually 7 days. In any case, whether it's 7 days or 7 years, 7 years sounds more arduous. So I'll go with that one. So he works for 7 years for Laban. He doesn't earn a penny, by the way. There's no money involved. The payoff is supposed to be that he gets to marry Leah, and then after that, he'll have Rachel too. But then when the 7 years is completed, Laban says, well, you have to work another 7 years now if you want to marry Rachel. So then he works for 14 years, and then it actually stretches out into 20. So he spent a great deal of his life, in order to get married to the one he really wants, which is Rachel. And then it turns out that Rachel can't have children. Big problem. So they wait and they pray and nothing happens. And so she has a maid. And as we found with Hagar, the maid of Sarah, in the culture of that time, the maid could bear a child for her mistress. And so this is what happened, is that Leah had a maid and Rachel had a maid, and Jacob fathered children with both of those maids, Zilpah and Bilhah. And then he at that point, Leah wasn't having children either. And then so Leah became fertile, and he had a child through Leah. And then finally, it says, God remembered Rachel. Thank you for remembering me, God. And God hearkened to her and opened her womb. And then she finally has a child, And just like Sarah had one child, Rachel has one child, and that child is Joseph. And that because Rachel was the love of Jacob's life. And so from the get-go, this son was going to be the favored son. He was going to love Joseph more than any other because of his love for the mother. So then Jacob has a dream, and he's told to go home. And at this point, he's been there for 20 years. But Laban doesn't want him to go home, and he doesn't want to pay him. And so there are various verses which talk about what happens in the interim while they're negotiating. And eventually they make a covenant. And I wanted to point this out because the concept of covenant in this Hebrew society, in the society of these people at that time, was of course not limited to the covenant with God. The covenant with God was a very distinctive covenant, but they also had other covenants because covenant really means contract. So Jacob and Laban had a contract, and according to the provisions of this contract, Jacob agreed not to marry any women except for the two daughters of Laban. That's why he agreed to him leaving. I don't want you. I want the inheritance to go through them. I don't want it to be split with other women that you end up marrying. So, having agreed to that covenant, he finally leaves Padan Aram and returns to the promised land 20 years later. And so who is he going to encounter first is his brother Esau. And it's been 20 years, but Esau's mad. Esau was very angry when he left, and Jacob was afraid of what's going to happen when I encounter him. So he was prepared to actually give Esau whatever he wanted. You want my sheep? You want my wife? You want my children? Whatever you want, I'll give it to you because I know I did you wrong by stealing your birthright. So what happens is one of the really heartwarming stories that we encounter in the biblical narrative. And that is that when Jacob meets Esau, Esau runs to him, embraces and kisses him, and both of the brothers weep. They have been reconciled, and it's because of Esau. Esau has forgiven his brother. We see a similar story, and we'll get to that tomorrow, with Joseph and his brothers. When the brothers who have done evil to him, who basically tried to kill him by putting him in a pit in the desert and leaving away any sort of identification that would, by taking his many-colored cloak. And then he lives his life in Egypt and the tables turn, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. But in any case, those brothers were also reconciled in a very moving story. So then we have Jacob in the promised land, and one of the stories that is particularly prominent is the story of when their sister, Dinah, was either seduced or raped. It's not absolutely clear which way it was, but basically the son of the king of a particular city or city-state within the Holy Land takes advantage of this daughter, does not marry her, and has relations with her, And that is a capital crime as far as the brothers are concerned. So the brothers conspire with each other, and they bring about the death of Hamor and Shechem, Hamor being the father. That's another story I don't really know how to understand, except to see that the people of this time have a very strong sense of morality, and they are going to implement that morality. They don't have a government. There's no king. There's no constitution. There's no elected representatives. There's nothing at all. The only thing you have is the decisions of the people themselves. And this is the sons of Jacob getting together and making a decision that they're going to execute the law as they understand it. This is the law of their tribe. And this is a law that says we will not tolerate the violation of any woman in our community. It reminds me a little bit of how the mafia used to work in Italy. In Italy, if you did something that was unlawful according to the mafia code, then they were going to come after you. Now, the next theme is that God is telling Jacob to worship in Bethel. And so he goes back there with his family, and that God appears once again to Jacob, blesses him and names him, gives him the new name Israel, and promises him the land that was given to his grandfather Abraham and his father Isaac. So this is these are the themes that you find in the story and in the chapters about Isaac and Jacob. And so I wanted to pause here for a moment and ask you if you had any comments, you had any questions, what part of this story you found interesting, what part of it is, with modern sensibilities, we tend to have parts of these stories that are difficult for us to read, difficult for us to understand, difficult for us to even feel are relevant in our time. And the easy way, of course, is to say, well, let's not talk about it, or let's just say that this was something that happened in history, and and thank God it won't ever happen again. But I think it's important for us to reach a new understanding, an understanding that is based on reconciliation with the past, reconciliation between religions, because ultimately this is, as we saw yesterday, the Guardian made it very clear that the Baha'is are going to be the reconcilers of religion. This is our job, is to bring people together from different religions. And in order to do that, we have to be very honest about what is there. You can't whitewash things. You can't say, you can't deny the existence of things that exist, that are there in the scripture. You can understand them differently, yes, but don't treat them with a lack of respect, because by doing so, you are basically showing disrespect to all the followers of that religion. And you'll never reconcile. You'll never help those people to reconcile with other religions if you don't respect them. That's the bottom line, really, is this respect and this knowledge. You must, and the first act of respect is to actually know something about their scripture, to know something about their beliefs. I find it. I had an awful experience, which I will share with you reluctantly because it was so painful. I was married to a Jewish woman, and my wife went to Chicago to go to a family wedding. And she went to the house of worship. And she was very close to the faith at that time. This could have been the moment where she really accepted Baha'u'lláh. But because of the actions of the person she encountered at the house of worship, it closed the door for her. And this is what happened. What happened was she asked a question of a tour guide it was a question about, a very innocent question about why is there a need for a new manifestation of God? We have all these other religions. She being Jewish, she comes from the Jewish background. Why is it that it's necessary to have another manifestation of God? And the tour guide, young, probably not very well trained, certainly not very sensitive or compassionate, said, well, progressive revelation, of course, turned around and left. That dismissal and that lack of respect wounded her so much she never wanted to talk about the faith. I was absolutely horrified when she came home with having had that experience. And of course, I wish that she'd never gone to the house of worship, because if she hadn't gone to the house of worship, she and my mother, who is also a Baha'i, were nurturing her to come to an acceptance of Baha'u'lláh. But we couldn't do anything because of that one person who had so broken her heart. So we have to be very, very sensitive to the beliefs and even the prejudices of other people. We see that people have prejudices. Of course they have prejudices. They're human. We have to be compassionate and think about, how can I help this person come from wherever they are, in their understanding of reality, and come closer to the truth. But as I said, now I want to invite you to ask your questions and make your comments.
Yes, Peter. You mentioned Bethel, and Bethel is still a very sacred place for the Jews, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. And it's a place when people go on pilgrimage. And there are literally millions of Christians who go on pilgrimage every year, especially around the Feast of Tabernacles, which is called in Hebrew Sukkot, and it happens usually in the fall. In fact, it happens just around this time.
So is there a connection between Bethel and Bethlehem?
No. They're two different cities. They're in very different locations. And also, they have only in common one part, which is Beth. And Beth is actually a transliteration of three letters. A B, actually two letters, a B and a T. But it's a particular kind of a T. And the way in English that they represented this T was to write TH. So Beit is the word. And Beit means house. Beit. Anytime you see that, it means Beit. So Beit El is the house of God. And whereas Bethlehem is Beit Lechem. And lechem means meat or food. Lechem can either mean bread or it can mean meat, depending on the context. And so the town or city of Bethlehem is named the house of bread or the house of meat. I don't know why. Maybe I've never seen an explanation of why, but it's located very close to Jerusalem. It's literally like, a few miles away. And as is Hebron, the town of Hebron. But the only thing that they have in common is that they're both named the house of something.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Peter, I'm just fascinated by, and I've never thought about it until you described it, how God's Holy Spirit finally allowed pregnancy by all those mothers, 3 generations. I mean, and then you said later on, you talk about Christ in John the Baptist. To me, that's a very fascinating continuation of what as you refer to as an old story. And I'm glad because I learned that today, and I will keep that. I will certainly keep that in mind when I will talk about, birth, Christ's birth, virgin birth. That's another story, but it's similar to that.
It's very similar to that. And it's you see, if people, it's an unnecessary stumbling block and the unnecessary stumbling block can be removed if Christians are better informed about Judaism. And basically, if they're better informed about the Bible, if they'd read the Bible more carefully, they would see that this practice of God enabling a woman to give birth is not something that rare. It's happened multiple times. And it happened because somebody prayed, because somebody asked for it. What's unique in the case of Jesus is nobody asked for him to be born.
That's the only difference.
And the miraculous birth was his will, not in response to a request from a human being. And also, of course, the other fact is that nobody questioned the fathership of, let's say, Joseph. Everybody assumed, of course, Joseph's father is Jacob, right? So they didn't say, well, because who knew that it was miraculous? It's not like it went out on the APB, it's not all over the internet. That's probably a private story between his wife and him. They know that she was barren, and they know that she prayed and asked for God's blessing so she could have a child, and that she had a child. They knew it. It's probably not public knowledge. And even if it was public knowledge, this is not something that was talked about. It was always assumed that still Joseph's, that Joseph is still Jacob's son, right? Whereas, and apparently the same thing was true with Jesus. This is very interesting. When you study very carefully all of the references to Jesus and his relationship with his father, with his stepfather, in effect, the people of that time around them did not know that he was the Son of God. They did not have that knowledge. It was only later on that they came to understand that. And there were actually lots of Christians who didn't understand that. I even wonder whether Paul understood it, because Paul refers to Jesus as the son of Joseph, which is really kind of so.
And that's the Davidic lineage goes through Joseph. I mean, It doesn't go through, you see, so this is where it becomes confusing.
This is where it becomes confusing, but it also this is something that Baha'is are going to find, is that we can go back and we can find that Jesus himself refers to himself as being the Davidic, the Messiah, but only in a certain context. It's not in the full context of being the seed of David. That's Baha'u'lláh. Baha'u'lláh is the seed of David. And Baha'u'lláh is the return of Christ, which it all connects, you see, because Christ was the Messiah. He was the Davidic Messiah, but he's in potentia. His full splendor is revealed in Baha'u'lláh because he is the seed of David, and he's also the full manifestation of Jesus. Because Jesus
This is amazing.
because Jesus is two things. Jesus is prophesying the coming of his return. And that's when the big stuff happens. The big stuff happens when the Son of God comes in the clouds and the glory of the Father. Like everybody expected that the big stuff was going to happen with Jesus. It doesn't. The whole message of Jesus is to prepare for Baha'u'lláh. That's what he says, I'm going to return. That's when you're going to have the unity of mankind.
With a true lineage, with a family lineage.
Exactly, with the full lineage. Exactly.
Yeah, I get it now. I get it.
So when we say that when Baha'u'lláh says he's the return of Jesus, he doesn't mean the return of Jesus in the same way that Muhammad is the return of Jesus, or the Bab is return of Jesus. In both of those cases, they're return of Jesus because they're manifestation of God. And in the realm of the unity of the manifestations, they're all the return. All of them. Right? But in the realm of the special quality of a dispensation, the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh is the full
seed.
return of Jesus as he predicted. As he said, when I come again, I will be the king. I will be the judge. I will reorganize the whole world. It will be one religion. It will be one faith. All of this will happen in the future.
Lawgiver. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what happens with Baha'u'lláh. And
this is so, for me, thank you, because this really makes it even a stronger conversation, shall I say. Yeah, thank you. This was really an eye-opener for me. I don't know why I didn't put this together, but you're doing a great job.
And we have to remember, when you're sitting in front of a Christian, there's a time and place for everything. So be very, very careful that you don't talk like this with a Christian too early, because they'll never come back. They'll never come back because they are so devoted to Jesus as they know him. This is their only knowledge of Jesus. They know Jesus through the way that Jesus has been interpreted for them by their priest, by their minister, and by their very careful reading of the Bible. See, you look at any denomination, nobody in the Christian faith allows you to read the Bible for yourself. No, you must always be guided by somebody else who knows how to understand everything. And this is what makes the faith of Baha'u'lláh so unique and such a sign of the cycle of fulfillment and of the coming of age of humanity. Because we're not interpreting the Bible through the eyes of any other human being. No other human being has the right to tell us what to think. We see through our own eyes, and we're responsible for seeing through our own eyes. You know?
That's right. Accountable.
And you look at what's the second hidden word? It's all about independent investigation of reality. What is the first story in the Seven Valleys? Independent investigation of reality. What is the you have this statement also when Baha'u'lláh is describing the path to spiritual awakening in the Kitab Yagan. He says you must detach yourself from all these things that you've learned from other people. And you must detach yourself from the hate and love of all these things. Because the love and the hate can turn you away from the truth. And you must see through your own eyes. And eventually, when you see through your own eyes, then God gives you the gift to see through his eyes. This is such an important theme for us to recognize in the scriptures, is that we never see through God's eyes unless we see through our own eyes. It's our own eyes that enable us eventually to see through God's eyes, to see things from his perspective. But what the priests have been telling us, and the rabbis and all of the experts, is if we want to see the way things really are, in other words, to see them through God's eyes, we have to agree with them. They're the key to seeing things through God's eyes. And that's wrong. That's always been wrong.
It's dogma.
That's dogma. Exactly. That's dogma. And it's tremendously it's so easy for us to fall back into that. It's so easy to say, well, so-and-so, this Baha'i or that Baha'i said such and such, and so it must be true. No. Read the book. Think for yourself.
Yeah.
Discover it for yourself.
Yeah.
It's hard work. Yes, it is. But we're grown-ups now. That's what, God says we're grown-ups. Now, the Guardian says we're adolescents. Well, of course. When do we become a grown-up according to Baha'u'lláh? 15. What is 15? Adolescence. It all lines up perfectly. At 15, you're an adult. You begin your adult life, but you're not ready for a lot of things.
Yeah.
You're in the process of maturing. But we're always in the process of maturing. It goes on forever. And some people, like some kids at the age of 15, are ready for everything. They're so mature. And others are still babies. And we have a lot of babies, unfortunately, in the world. We've got a lot of, underage 15-year-olds who need a lot of care. They need to be held. We have to hold their hands. We have to treat them like children. And we have to also look at our own state and see where we're acting like children and where we need to mature.
I'm going to have to really practice, this an incredible becoming fertile or pregnant, how to put that in a 1, 2 or 3 sentences, be quite precise so that it's not confusing and because, we talk to young students all the time. I've got about half a dozen right now of different religious persuasion. Some talk about the 12th Imam, the other one, 12 tribes of Israel. And, it goes sort of back and forth between the Imams or the tribes, right? And so you're really going to have to be a little bit on your alert understanding whether you're going to teach through Shia or you're going to teach through the Old Testament or you're going to come through Book of Revelation. This really, it's something that needs to be practiced. It doesn't come natural.
It's the individual. We always have to be focused on the Israel individual. And by the way, when we're teaching somebody, anybody who's teaching the faith to an individual and really nurturing that soul towards hopefully someday becoming a Baha'i, you have to go back to study. You have to every night.
Yes.
When you're planning to meet the person the next day, you better pray about it. You better crack the books. Go And make sure you're prepared for that next session.
I've got them
Because
for 3 months. They can't escape me, and I can't escape them, because
Okay.
you know, they come every 2-3 times a week. And so one of them finally is taking the Igan home. The other one's finally taken. I would never give up. I finally given out the Dawnbreaker, especially because it's shaky, and the, you know, the 12th Iman and the Shiite connection to the Mahdi, right? So I'm pretty good at the Bible, but I'm not really good, you know. So I had to go back to the Dawnbreaker to kind of get my act together.
now what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to unmute all of you. Make sure, I think all of you are unmuted at this point. And all you have to do is press on unmute yourself to be able to talk. I have to leave for a minute to bring my daughter to the bathroom. Okay?
Okay. We're used to it by now.
Yeah, we're level ones, yeah.
Oh, so Peter, most of your seekers in your life, are they Christians?
Yes, there is. But when I moved to Scotland, a good friend of mine embraced the faith, and another friend embraced the faith. But yeah, most people I know are Christians. My family are Christians, but not practicing Christians, you know.
Church of England.
Whatever.
Church of England.
No, Catholic.
Oh, very interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and
Well, Wales, that's right. A little bit of the Italian. I get it. Yeah, I get it.
In Liverpool, there was a lot of Catholics. A lot of Irish came over in the family, you know.
Right. I get it. Yeah.
So the women in my family, my grandmother, my mother, my aunties were very devout Catholics, you know. So I was brought up with the really beautiful principles, you know.
Yeah.
And whatever, you know. And my mother accepted me as being a Baha'i. Another fasting time when I was visiting, I'd say to her, I'm fasting, yeah, I don't want anything to eat till after 6 o'clock, whatever. And she would wait, and after 6 o'clock, she would give me a meal, you know. And my father always asked me, he read half of the book of vignettes, and he was amazed about the Apple Baha, you know. I think he really touched him. And when I go to Liverpool, I'd visit the Baha'i Centre, and they used to say to me, "Oh, you're going to visit the Baha'i Church because the Baha'i Centre in Liverpool?" And I would say, "Yeah, you know." So that was nice, you know.
Yeah, interesting.
And my brother, who works in the fruit market in Liverpool, was a friend of a Baha'i for many years before I became a Baha'i, you know. And I know the person who my brother is friends with. So just those connections, you know.
Yeah. Well, Seattle is quite agnostic, atheist, New Ager. That new atheist, even though Christian, but it also has a growing Asian community. And I am here across from the university. It has just endless numbers of Chinese. So we give downstairs, we give about 8-10 Chinese prayer books out almost every time we're open.
Oh, lovely.
In Chinese. On a regular basis. We don't know what happens to them all, but we come downstairs and sure enough, they're all gone. And we're starting to run short on Chinese materials. We're going to have to start to order more because apparently the bypassers are curious why we have something Chinese on the table.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. Yeah, I travel the world as a seaman, you know, and I've visited many countries, met Baha'is in different countries, you know.
Yeah, me too.
So Bahá'u'lláh Bahá'u'lláh blessed me because I was a major seaman as a boy. Then I worked ashore for 18 years, raised a family.
Yeah.
Never thought in a million years I would travel abroad on the ship again. But Bahá'u'lláh blessed me, you know.
We're lucky, you know. I've been to 65 countries myself.
Wow.
So, you know, you call what we got around.
Yeah, sure. Probably you've been to more countries than me, you know.
Yeah. And that's why the house says culture matters. When you discuss it about the house says, teach those that are receptive. So don't throw it out, you know, teach those that are receptive. And culture matters. So if somebody said, how do you know God exists? Well, culture matters. Whether you talk to the Polynesians, you talk to in Thailand, to a Buddhist, or you talk in Seattle to an agnostic. I mean, it's a different answer.
Yeah.
It's a different journey on the same question, different direction. And that's why we have the campus, because we want to understand the diverse conversation on similar quests. And that's why I found what you said today so interesting, Peter, because I'm trying to figure out where we're going to deposit, into what conversations does this needs to be deposited. And not necessarily in a Buddhist or Zoroastrian conversation. So Zoroaster had a virgin birth, so let's just call it what it is. But you know, it's all very. We get bombarded on a regular basis. We had yesterday somebody come in. She said, "Can I come in for 30 minutes?" I said, "Sure, honey. Don't come too late." What, 3 hours later, we're still sitting there. And so we are, you know, we are honestly, we are in the floodgates open through our little museum here that I never, well, I kind of thought it would, but I didn't realize how powerful in the end that is going to be. We're now in Cameroon, we're in Rwanda, we're everywhere through our youth project, Uniting Youth for World Peace, right? Under the museum auspices. So you just have to use innovation and become imaginative.
Imaginative, and also constantly expanding our resources.
Yes.
You know, the more resources we have, the better. I mean, that's you know, it's very interesting. When I first had this idea of coming up with a program that would talk about the book of Genesis, it was an inspiration. Honestly, it's not that my rational mind thought, well, I've always wanted to do this. No, it was more like, no, you need to put the floater out here and see what kind of response you get, because I've never seen a course on this ever at a Baha'i summer school, winter school, online, Wilmette Institute, nothing. I've never seen anything like this. And I thought, well, maybe I should just do it. Yeah. And what I'm finding is that we are finding material that can be useful for our lives, for our understanding personally, and also for our teaching. And that is, instead of it being an academic approach, which I don't think would have been of use to any of us, honestly, we'd have this sort of philosophical understanding. But the philosophical understanding is not what actually counts. What counts is connecting with the Word of God and coming to an understanding of it that enables you to build bridges with other people. That's a completely different thing. It's a completely different thing.
Not about the income, it's about the outcome.
Exactly. It's also not about, sometimes as Baha'is, we look to study other scriptures as a way of, shall we say, supporting our own beliefs. Okay? Mm-hmm. It's not that either. It's finding out what do they actually say, and how does that, because if you know what they actually say, now you can actually talk about these stories with people for whom the stories are sacred. When you if you're talking, for example, how many Baha'is have had a Jehovah's Witness knock on their door?
My son is an elder, Jehovah Witness elder.
God bless him. So what happens is, so often what happens is the Baha'is don't know how to deal with them. So they make them go away. And that's too bad, because what we should do is invite them into our home and discourse with them about the Bible. And when they see that we know something about the Bible, their hearts soften and they can, I'm not saying all of them, not all of them can listen, but some of them will have a listening ear when
Peter,
they hear.
Do you know how many Baha'is talk when Jehovah Witness come? They talk about the new name and the return. Jehovah Witness don't believe in the return of Christ on earth.
Exactly.
I mean, they don't believe in the soul. They blow it right up front, and that's why I have a slideshow, just what Jehovah Witness believe, so that you get a head start. And I get called, like Ted Brownstein and myself, we get calls on talking to Jehovah's Witnesses all the time, because Baha'is have no idea. No idea.
No idea. Exactly. And the same thing will happen if a Mormon comes and knocks on your door. You need to know how to respond to a Mormon. And if you have never read the Book of Mormon and you have never read anything else by the Mormons, you're not ready. The
Doctrines and Covenant. You got to be able to respond to their doctrines and covenant. And we got a slideshow for that.
You need to know the history.
That the Mormon tract that we have, we've got statistics running behind everything we do. The Mormon tract that we have is has the highest numbers of people looking at it. And I'm surprised, because I don't always bring it out. But boy, I tell you, that is by far the most examined Baha'i faith, Mormon, Mormons and Baha'i faith. It's the most examined slide presentation that we have.
And this is responding to the need of the time. You know, where Bahá'u'lláh says, don't be so concerned about what happened in the past. Pay attention to what's happening right in front of you.
Right.
And this is what we're talking about, is that when we see receptivity from a certain community of people, we've got to be ready. We've got to provide the service of providing the bridge for those people to investigate and to discover Bahá'u'lláh. It's not our responsibility to convert them. It's not a job, but to make it possible for people to investigate for themselves. And there is a very, right now amongst Mormons, there's this understanding that something's gone wrong. You know, they look around them and they see that many Mormons feel that the traditional authorities are trying too hard to keep them from looking anywhere else, from going outside of their perspective. And that is driving them away from having confidence in their leadership.
Plus, they try to get into Israel to get a seat there, and Israel closed the doors on the Mormons. You know, they're hoping to bring their New Jerusalem into Israel, and it's not working.
No, as long as the... Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, just you speak about the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses. It's just being friendly with them and acknowledging their understanding. And you know, there are a few of them who I'm kind of, my granddaughter was a friend of a Mormon, same age as her. I know her mother, her father, and you know, I just, you know, maybe express a little Baha'i quote, possess a pure, kindly heart, or something like that, you know. And it's just being friendly with them, because in the heart, they're good people.
They want to know that you understand their doctrine. Because if you're just nicey gumbaya, they fear, oh, well, he doesn't know anything. And they sort of are nice to you. But when they get back to the Kingdom Hall or to the church, they say, no, those Baha'is don't have a clue what's going on. Don't even bother to talk to them. They don't understand our doctrine and covenant. They don't understand scripture. Because if they did, they would be like us. But because they're ignorant, they just nicey. So they brush us off.
Yeah, I've had one or two like that, you know.
That's true. That's true. There are some that just brush us off. But the other thing is better to be brushed off when we are loving and kind and
Yes.
encouraging, because
Yeah.
there are plenty of people who spout the teaching of love and kindness and empathy, and there are
Yeah.
very few people who live it. There are
Yeah.
very few people who make you feel in their presence that they actually care for you.
You
And
know,
that's
the
so.
Guardian tells us, find things that you have in common.
Yes.
Don't bore in on this
Yeah.
stuff that is controversial. And then
Yeah.
leave it at that. And I'm finding that is much more
Yeah.
effective in the long run.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing
And
is,
with Jehovah Witnesses, we have Trinity in common to most of the degree. So this is a big deal amongst Christians. So when you talk to Jehovah Witnesses, boy, Trinity is where we can have some kind of a doctrinal friendship.
so I see that Angela and George are very quiet today.
I know. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, are they being very quiet because they enjoy just listening? Or is it because I want to make sure that you are part of the conversation, because
I'm listening.
yeah, see, George has lived all over the place, right? You pioneered to Africa. Where did you pioneer to in Africa?
Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda.
Wow, 3 countries.
Yes.
And when was this? About what years
It was
approximately?
1972 to 1974.
Mm-hmm.
And it was and the reason I was there because it was the end of the 10-year plan, which was 9-year plan or 10-year plan, I have forgotten. And
9.
it was we were going to complete the process and make sure that the goals of the plan is achieved. And what we were doing, we were going to any opportunity to villages and so on and try to invite and do the mass teaching, as it were. And of course, I always sometimes tend to do something which is a little bit unusual. So I went there. I went to the university, sat in the cafeteria, and invited a lot of people, and in the Baha'i Center and everything, and everybody was surprised. I remember Mr. Mehdi Samandari, who was then was there. He gave a talk, and then of course after when I finished, then they told me, look, the plan is that we are supposed to go to villages and inform the people in the villages. So from then on, I went to the villages and tried to teach the faith in the villages for the local people, because that is how you could get the local spiritual assembly formed and so on and so forth. So it was a wonderful experience. I have a lot of good experiences. And Mr. Mohajer was the one who was leading me. And he was a fantastic man, and I learned a lot from him. Well, I was really blessed by being in contact with these people like at Hand of the Cause, Dr. Mojer, and so on and so forth. Mr. Yazdi was the one who later on became the member of the International Teaching Center. And they were fantastic experiences I've had. And then after that, because I couldn't get a job, I had to come back to United Kingdom to study and to prepare so that I could go back and get a job, which I didn't manage. So I stayed in United Kingdom, got married with the Irish lady, and now I have 2 children. And one of them was the one who came today, and surprisingly, and I was a little bit late because of it. By the way, I sent you yesterday because the genealogy of the manifestation of God came up. I sent one of the presentation showing all those things, and the source of those information mainly is from God Passes By. So if you want to know, for example, where Zoroaster connects to Bahá'u'lláh and where to Abraham, you will see in that one. I've sent it, and I don't know whether they are passing on to you or not.
How did you send it?
I sent it to your email address.
Oh, to my email address. Oh, really?
No, it is the one that it is the one that shows this links. The one that shows the link, I click on and come. it is, I sent the reply and it should be in there.
The
It
link.
could be to Clearwater Baha'is goes.
Oh, it's
it-
probably to Clearwater Baha'is. Okay.
Yes.
I'll discuss that with Jeremiah and
Yeah, it is just to
make sure
keep
I
it
get
and for the future reference and so on. It's not a, something that I'm sure you know all that anyway.
well, no, I don't. I'm not a graphic artist. I don't represent things beautifully in images, and I'm very keen on collecting images so that I can use them in the future because it's a tremendous teaching aid. We have become so visually oriented. I mean, naturally human beings are visually oriented, but we've become very more so with the advent of television and then the internet. And now, if you don't have a visual component, many people just can't focus. They have difficulty processing language just by language. I find even with my own children, I have to say something twice or three times for them to get it. But if they saw an image, bam, they got it immediately.
It is very difficult actually to follow. When you look at it, it is just to show the truth of it. But when you go, you try to because it is connected with lines. Lines
Yes.
from right from the top from Buddha, Krishna, and so on and so on, all of them. And you
Good.
can find all of them are connected and in the end up with the Bahá'u'lláh and the Bab.
So I want to tell you because I don't think any of you know this story, is I always when I was first became a Baha'i, I was 19, and I had this it wasn't a dream, it wasn't a vision, it was something else. It was this compulsion inside of me that made me feel that someday I must marry an African princess. Okay? So
Very good.
I'm married to a woman from Madagascar. And Madagascar is considered part of Africa, although people in Madagascar don't necessarily consider themselves part of Africa, but it's included in the map. And my two children are, you can tell by looking at them that they're predominantly Malagasy. That's what they call themselves. They have Malagasy traits. And so I don't have any experience of I have no experience of teaching, travel teaching, mass teaching, because they weren't doing that in Madagascar. What they were doing is they were doing everything Ruhi based. They were doing Ruhi classes all over the place. But I became very close friends with a woman whose father was one of the first Baha'is in the country. And he learned English, became fluent in English, and translated many of the writings, Gleanings, Kitab-i-Yagan, also Abdul Baha, some answered questions, and introductory books like Esselmont, like Baha'u'lláh in the New Era, like Thief in the Night, into the Malagasy language. And those, he left them handwritten translations to his daughter, his daughter is a very close friend of mine, and her daughter married a Persian physician when she was going to university in the United States. They live in Madagascar, and their mother-in-law lives close by. They're all Baha'is. And I tell you this story because they are like the light carriers for this community. They have their faith is so profound, and they are so communicative with other people about the Baha'i teachings. And someday I'm working with Lulu is her name. I'm working with Lulu to get all of the transcriptions of those books published so that the Malagasy people can read about the faith in their own language. They have very little translated at this point because it's a rare language. You have 24 million people who speak the language. It's not a high priority for the, the language, the different experts in translation. There are literally thousands of languages that are higher priority for them than Malagasy. But this travel, if I hadn't become interested in marrying somebody in Madagascar, I would never have gone there. So our hearts are prepared in so many different ways, and how we get to some places is only part of the story. It's when we get there, what do we do? What do we do? And who do we speak with? And who do we love? And who becomes connected with us for life? The very important questions. Like, I'm sure all of you wherever you've ended up in a place where you can serve the faith. And you can serve the faith in ways that you might not have even imagined doing in other places, and maybe the way you serve the faith is very different. I think often we wish for the old days. We think, oh, in the old days I did this, and old days I did. Yeah, but how about the new days? The new days are what's going to come tomorrow. And tomorrow could be your greatest service to Bahá'u'lláh. And that's that. I feel so happy that I'm able to talk with you and share this material with you, because we're all living for the future. We're all living to build the kingdom of God, and the building process is a long one, and it's going to take a lot of determination and patience and a lot of action. And
that's what we got, bits and pieces, and the plan, right? 9-year plan, all the way to what, 2041, 46, I forget already. So short term, long term.
Exactly. But then also for each one of us, we have our individual plan, because we don't know how long we'll be here.
Do you have your individual personal teaching plan made up?
Mm-hmm.
Do you reflect on it quarterly? Do you send it to the local assembly? I'm sure you do, because I do too.
That's true, because once you send it, George is trying to speak. You have to unmute.
I know. I'm just saying that we were just following what Universal House of Justice plan was at the time, and that is where it was the 2 lots came. I was the first one came, and there was another lot came a month later, and they went right across Africa, and then to teach the faith, so that they will achieve the goals of the plan at the time. And of course that was the experience. And then after that, wherever we would go wherever they have told us to go, and I was advised to do that. And when I finished, of course, when I was in Northern Ireland, I was sent, wherever there was a vacancy, I went to the places where they needed to form local spiritual assembly.
Yeah, excellent.
You know what I mean? That is, we just followed whatever institution has led us, and it is the same now. We are led by the institutions basically, but when we do that individual, is based on what is instructed in the Baha'i writings, especially that of beloved guardian, that an Abdul Baha and Baha'u'lláh, that teaching is an individual thing. In other words, you can do that at any capacity you want. And also, it is the most source of motivation, teaching which makes us to learn, go on a study. If we don't do that, we gradually, fade away, become very, very superficial and not like. It's very, very important that everybody should be able to teach the faith, and then not to make it very difficult for them. Say teaching is you go and start of it, you go proclaim the faith, inform the faith, and if they come further, then you teach the faith. That's the way I do it anyway. Initially I tell them, but if they come later, then of course I will direct them to the various meetings and so on and so forth, depending on the person. In other words, I don't consider myself the person who's changed the person. I do not want to consider myself. I would like to make the person learn from the faith, and they come with their own initiative and motivation and try to find out. Then I will send to the other people, because I like it that way. I don't want to be the person who's leading and things like that. I want to leave it to the hand of the, to everybody participate, basically. Also, when you take a individual to a Baha'i fireside, you're making everybody else also to become motivated. They become stronger. They become deeper. In other words, it is not just when the individual is the contact, he's the person who makes everybody else to teach themselves. So it is very, very good to make firesides and so on and so forth, and make everybody to participate, encourage everybody to participate. That's what I do.
So my friends, my 4-year-old is hungry.
Is he living in Hungary?
Here she is. Put it down for me. Put it down. Yeah. Here.
Oh, hello.
Hello. Beautiful.
This is Ava. This is Ava.
Yeah, she appreciates.
Hello, Ava.
That is very good. She appreciates.
Hello,
Very
Ava.
good.
Say hello, Ava.
Oh,
You don't have
lovely.
to say hello, Ava.
She has learned,
Oh, you're too
she has
shy.
learned the name
He's
as
too
well.
shy to say hello, Ava.
Hello,
Adorable.
Oh,
Yes.
look at that beautiful hair. I like her haircut, It's a like haircut. It's very nice
That's
haircut.
that's
I
her
love
mother.
that haircut.
That's her mother's. Her mother's very good at doing different hair things.
I know, I
but-
can see it.
Yeah. Naturally, her hair. I don't know if you've ever heard of Angela. Wait a second. I don't know if you remember afros.
See, it turns out this.
I've
Do you
heard of
remember
that.
yeah.
afros?
I've
Okay.
heard Afro, yeah.
So my girl, when her hair is not put in some sort of like braids, these are little braids actually. But if it's not in braids or something else, then it's a huge afro, which is very thick and incredibly curly and resistant to combing and brushing.
That's right, very difficult. Yes, very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is one is very tender-hearted. He's a very tender-hearted person,
Yes.
very kind person.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
No, Peter, my daughter has also extremely curly, tight, cannot brush. I know exactly what you mean. And actually, I used to have that too. And my son is perfectly straight hair. It's the Viking influence in our case. And so different culture have, and the same thing with my mother and my grandmother. My mother was the curly one. Her brothers were straight. And it went for 4 generations. One tight, curly, and the others perfectly straight.
Huh?
My daughter said, "Mom, are you sure we have the same dad? Look at my hair. Look at my brother's hair." I said, "Honey, it's a family tradition."
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes. Well, my friends, it's been wonderful spending this time with you, and I look forward to you tomorrow when we'll talk about Joseph. And Joseph being in many ways the most beloved of all of the patriarchs that we have encountered in the book of Genesis, and the stories of Joseph resonate, I think, more with our hearts than any other of them. And so whoever compiled the book of Genesis did a very good job to end with the story of Joseph.
Is that right to say
Yeah.
that the night that Bob declared his mission, he had to try to interpret the version of the Quran about the Joseph? It was the
Yes.
And then
Cabinet of
course,
Joseph.
and of course, then Bob mentioned part of it, one part of it, and then continued later. But he left one chapter to be the one whom God shall make manifest, which Baha'u'lláh did, which is the book of Ikan. Book of Certitude is a continuation of that. So it is all very much connected, and it is very, very important in the Baha'i history and literature.
Exactly. So we will get into that. We'll start to get into that huge, profound, and wide-ranging theme. But we'll do that tomorrow. And I wish you to have a wonderful evening and the rest of your waking hours. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Look forward.
Thank
Thank
you
you for
very much.
everybody. Really,
Right.
we love to see you all. Really
And
great to see you all.
everybody.
Allah Abba. God bless you
Allah
all.
Akbar.
Bye-bye.
Bye, beautiful.
Bye-bye.
Trick was even worse. Cards were more fake than your magic career. 5 stars.
Finally, Siri, let's make a deal. If I can refill this empty pack.